Growing up, education was very important in my family. My parents really harped on us, my brother and myself, and my sister, to get good grades. A's and B's on report cards, honor rolls, things like that. That's and I thank them a lot for pushing us to do that. Um, and so throughout my academic journey, all the way up until high school, um, I did well. I did really well in school, and a lot of people they would always say like, "Oh, Brandon knows all the answers. Go ask him," or "Oh, I'm sure he'll get an A. Like he'll do really well." And it's great to hear that. I won't lie. It kind of builds the ego a little bit, but it did add some pressure to myself that I needed to uphold this image. I needed to be perfect. I needed to because that's how people saw me. And so um, when it came time to apply at college, I applied to almost every UC, and then I think just Cal State Fullerton as the CSU. And I was rejected by every UC I applied to, except for Cal State Fullerton being the one school. And I accepted Cal State Fullerton. I felt like I'd earned that. They wanted me, I wanted them. But a part of me felt that, the other schools didn't think I was worthy enough or capable to be in their program. And so there was a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, a little bit of extra pressure that I already had on me to do well. So my second year here, I started my engineering courses, and it went really well. I got a 4.0, and so on paper it looks like I did well, but uh, a lot of things were sacrificed to do that. My relationship with my girlfriend was very strained. My relationship with my family was very strained because I thought that I had to just isolate myself and be nose down and work super hard to survive in this major. And of course I still have that added pressure of like I need to be perfect. I need to have the best grades. And so I got a 4.0, but it sacrificed a lot, or a lot of things were put in the back seat. And so that following spring, spring 2020, was kind of I was going on the same path again, a lot of pressure to do well, to succeed. And then the pandemic hit that March, and then we all went home. And it was definitely a very rough time for me. I never learned virtually. I was away from my girlfriend. I was locked in my room for hours on end because I had to study. I had to do well. I had to succeed. And one class in particular that I was struggling with hard was statics. And I remember the professor canceling the second midterm and saying, because of the pandemic, we're just going to have a final. It's worth like 60% of your grade. And I was like, that was a lot. And for me, I was like, that's a lot of pressure to do well in this one exam. And so, um, I was feeling desperate. Like I needed to succeed. I needed to do well. I needed to keep up this image people had of me. And, in that pursuit of success and desperation, I unfortunately cheated on my final exam in statics. And of course, I was not the smartest person, so I got caught doing it. And I got an email early when I did cheat. I didn't really think much of it. A lot of it was because I was so clouded in desperation to do well. But then I got the email that an investigation was underway about the cheating situation in that class, and then that kind of hit me. Like, what have I done? Like, what did I just do? And that month of June was probably the worst time of my life because it was just a waiting game. What was the consequence? Was I going to be expelled? Was I going to have to be kicked out of school and move away from my girlfriend? And was my future over? Are people going to look at me as a cheater and like, oh, everything he earns from here on out is never going to be enough, or it's never going to be, there's always going to be an asterisk on it. And so, there was I was just in my room all summer. I'd come out to eat and maybe go to the bathroom, and then I go right back in. I had tremendous anxiety about, just the fear of what was going to happen to me. I really fell into a deep depression because I was ashamed of what I had done and the people that I had wronged for cheating. And I remember like every night I'd be going to bed crying because I thought that my future was over, and I thought I had, you know, brought shame to my family because they were paying for my tuition. They worked really hard to put their kids and myself in college and give us a life, give us a shot at being successful. And I felt like I kind of robbed that from them because of what I'd done. And so I remember when I had to tell them that I had cheated. This was like end of June. The professor had reached out and said, this is the information we have on you. And of course, I was ready to admit that I had cheated. I wasn't going to make excuses. Even because of the pandemic, people will say, give yourself some slack. But even in hard times, you can't throw away your ethics. You can't throw away your morals. And so I had to tell my parents that what I'd done. I was psyching myself up to tell them. And I remember my mom walking by. She saw me. I looked pale. I looked sick because I didn't know how to break the news to them. And so I was like, Mom, I need to tell you and Dad something. So we sat down on the couch. I was between them, and I was just crying as I told them what I'd done. Fortunately for them, for me, they were pretty supportive. They knew what I'd done was wrong, and I was afraid that they would look at me differently because you're paying all this money to send me to school, and I'm out here being dishonest and cheating. And they told me we want you to be successful. We don't want you to have to sacrifice your mental health to do it. And by taking all these course loads and forcing yourself to stay up late to do well in school, take a break. If it takes you 5 years or 6 years to graduate, to finish your major, do that. Take a class off, lighten your load. My mom, it took her 8 years to get her bachelor's. I know friends of mine they're finally getting their bachelor's after 10 years. And it was really nice to hear that. It was really nice to hear that I don't have to force it in 4 years, that it's okay to take a break and extend it out. At that point now, it was just waiting for the decision. So I remember the day, it was July 15th, at 1 p.m. I get an email from the professor and the academic board, or the dishonesty board. And the professor said, considering the circumstances, I'm just going to drop your grade from A to a B and move you on. And then the board, or the academic dishonesty council, said, we're just going to give you a warning. We'll keep an internal note. Just don't ever let this happen again. And, nothing's going to be on your transcript. And I remember crying tears of joy and telling my family, because I felt like I'd been given a second chance. I felt like I was given a second chance to turn my life around and never, or I guess repair my name in a sense. And so a lot of things changed at that point. That day I promised myself that I needed to look at school differently. I was so result oriented that I got to get this A, need this 4.0. It's all about the GPA. That I realized, going on this journey in engineering or any field, it's about learning the material. It's about, enjoying the process. Because a lot of people can graduate with good GPA, but maybe they don't know anything about the thing they studied for 4 years, because it was just, all they cared about was, what's the answer for the exam? What's the answer for the homework? Okay, cool, move on. Don't really sit there and learn the topics well. And so I changed my mindset, and I said, yes, I'm still going to work hard to get good grades. That's still going to be a focal point for me. But I'm going to learn to enjoy the process a little more and take it easy on myself if I don't know anything. The second thing that I promised myself was that I was going to be comfortable admitting that I don't know everything. That, not everyone knows all the answers. And if you don't know all the answers, use your resources. That was something that I struggled with before, was if I didn't know something, I was too arrogant to ask for help. Because again, people looked at me as, he's got to know all the answers. He knows everything. And so I realized the field of engineering is very team oriented. And a lot of people tell you the worst engineers are the ones that say they know everything. The best engineers are the ones that say they don't know everything, but they'll learn. They'll ask for help. They'll find ways to figure it out. And so that's the sort of route I wanted to take. And because of that, I met some really great people. All the friends you see me study with now, we've taken a bunch of classes together, and it's helped a lot tremendously. When I don't know something, I lean on them to help me. We study together, we do homework assignments together, we bounce ideas off each other, and understanding that I have such a strong support system to lean on allows me to not have to ever go down that hole again where I felt desperate or stuck or, you know, so just really just, yeah, I mean, I was so desperate for perfect grades and so fixated on doing well in school that I was just blinded and made a terrible mistake, you know, and I'm ashamed of it to this day. You know, I didn't want to tell people about this because I felt like a lot of people look at me and say, once a cheater, always a cheater. But I felt like in these past 2 years, I've been able to redeem myself and do it the right way. I've got 4.0s every semester since that day. I have an internship lined up this summer, and because of the friends I've made and the support system that I have behind me and the fact that I allow myself to lean on them has gotten me here. And so, you know, one big takeaway that I, you know, want people to take from this story is when like be comfortable admitting that you don't know everything, and be comfortable admitting that you need help. Because, you know, if you try to do it all alone, you try to go through life or academics or anything by yourself, it's hard, and it can, you know, lead you to dark places. And, you know, sometimes reaching out and asking for help is all it takes